put it in God's hands, He will handle it. Brothers and sisters, I came here today with one message: put IT in God's hands, He will handle IT. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know the weight you've been carrying, but I do know this: you were never meant to carry it alone. Some of you have been wrestling with things that are too heavy for human hands. The burdens of life, the pressures of this world, bills piling up, relationships breaking down, your mind running restless in the middle of the night, and you've been trying to fix it all by yourself. But hear me loud and clear: you can't fix what only God can handle. When life gets too heavy, put IT in His hands. When the doctor gives you a report you didn't expect, put IT in His hands. When the doors won't open and the walls are closing in, put IT in His hands. You see, there's a limit to human power, but there is no limit to God's power. The Bible says in 1 Peter 5:7, cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. Not just some anxiety, not just the easy stuff, but all of it. Why? Because God can do more with it than you can. When you put your problems in God's hands, you take them out of your own. And when you release it to Him, He goes to work. Let me tell you something. God is not intimidated by what you're facing. You might be up against something bigger than you, but nothing is bigger than Him. I'm reminded of a story in the Bible in 2 Chronicles 20, where King Jehoshaphat faced an enemy too vast, too powerful. It seemed impossible. But instead of panicking, instead of trying to fight in his own strength, he did something powerful. He prayed. He said, Lord, we do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. And do you know what God said? The battle is not yours, it's mine. Somebody needs to hear that today. The battle is not yours. IT belongs to God. And when Jehoshaphat put it in God's hands, victory came without a fight. The enemies turned on each other, and God's people walked away with the blessing. Here's what I want you to understand. Your job is to trust, and God's job is to work. But hear me, you cannot trust what you won't release. Some of you have been holding on too tight, trying to figure it out, fix it, control it. But if you would just release it to God, He will handle it in ways you never could. You see, when you hold it, you stress. But when God holds it, He blesses. When you hold it, you worry. But when God holds it, He works. Trust in divine timing. God's timing is never too early and never too late. It is always perfect. Yet, as human beings, we often struggle with waiting. We want answers immediately, solutions right now, and breakthroughs without delay. But when you trust in divine timing, you are placing your faith in a plan that is greater, wiser, and more comprehensive than anything you could ever imagine. Life has a way of pushing us to the edge, situations where you feel stuck, prayers that seem unanswered, and dreams that feel out of reach. In these moments, it's easy to question whether God is listening or whether He even cares. But the truth is, God is not bound by our schedules or limited by human deadlines. He works in ways we cannot always see or understand, but He is always working for our good. What may feel like a delay to us is often a season of preparation in His eyes. Think about the times in your life when you wanted something desperately but didn't receive it right away. Maybe you wanted that job, that relationship, or that opportunity, and it seemed like God was silent. But later, when you look back, you realize that the delay was actually His protection. He was preparing something better, something you couldn't have handled at the time. God's no or not yet is never a rejection, it's a redirection towards something greater. Trusting in divine timing means surrendering your impatience and believing that everything will unfold exactly when and how it's meant to. It means recognizing that what is meant for you will not pass you by. And when the time is right, nothing can stop it from coming to you. The Bible reminds us in Ecclesiastes 3:11, He has made everything beautiful in its time. This verse doesn't say everything happens instantly. It says everything becomes beautiful when the time is right. Even when you don't understand why things are taking so long, you can trust that God's plan is unfolding perfectly behind the scenes. During seasons of waiting, God often does His deepest work in us. He uses these times to strengthen our faith, shape our character, and align our hearts with His purpose. Waiting is not wasted when you trust that God is using every moment to prepare you for something greater. Sometimes the delay is where your faith grows the most. If you're facing uncertainty right now, if you're waiting on a breakthrough, an answer, or a new beginning, don't lose heart. God is never late. He is always on time. Surrender your timeline to Him. Lay down your worries and trust that He is working all things together for your good. What He has promised will come to pass not a moment too soon or too late, but in the perfect moment. So take a breath. Let go of the anxiety. Trust that what's meant for you is already on its way, and when it arrives, you'll realize that God's timing was always perfect. Let go of anxiety. Anxiety is something most of us experience at some point in our lives. It can creep in quietly or overwhelm us like a tidal wave, filling our minds with what-ifs, worst-case scenarios, and endless worries about the future. Whether it's about finances, relationships, health, or the unknown, anxiety has a way of stealing our peace and leaving us restless. But here's the truth: you were never meant to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. When you choose to place your problems in God's hands, something powerful happens. You release the burden of stress and fear. It's not that the challenges disappear instantly, but the weight of trying to control everything on your own is lifted. You stop relying solely on your strength and start depending on a God who is bigger than any problem you will ever face. The Bible tells us in 1 Peter 5:7, cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. This isn't just a suggestion, it's an invitation. God is inviting you to release every worry, every concern, and every fear into His capable hands. Why? Because He genuinely cares for you. He isn't distant or indifferent to your struggles. He sees every tear you cry, hears every unspoken prayer, and knows the burdens you carry, even the ones you hide from others. Anxiety often thrives on the illusion of control, the belief that if you worry enough, plan enough, or think through every detail, you can prevent bad things from happening. But the truth is, much of life is beyond our control. No amount of sleepless nights or anxious thoughts will change that. However, when you place your trust in God, you no longer have to figure everything out on your own. You can rest knowing He is in control. Letting go of anxiety doesn't mean you ignore your responsibilities or pretend problems don't exist. It means recognizing that you don't have to navigate life's challenges alone. When you pray and release your burdens to God, you are inviting Him to step into your situation and do what you cannot. You exchange fear for faith, trusting that God is working behind the scenes even when you can't see it. Think about this. How many times have you worried about something that never even happened? Anxiety robs you of today's peace while making you afraid of a future that may never come. But when you surrender your worries to God, you begin to experience the peace that surpasses all understanding, the kind of peace that doesn't always make sense, but fills your heart when you trust in Him. Philippians 4:6-7 reminds us, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Notice the promise here: when you bring your worries to God, His peace will guard your heart and mind. This means your heart is protected from fear and your mind is shielded from overthinking. Letting go of anxiety is an act of faith. It's choosing to believe that even when things feel out of control, God is still in control. It's choosing to trust that He is working all things together for your good, even when you don't understand the why behind the situation. So, what are you holding on to today that is weighing you down? Is it a financial burden, a health concern, a broken relationship, or uncertainty about the future? Whatever it is, God is inviting you to lay it down. He wasn't meant to carry this weight. He wants to carry it. Believe in His power. No problem is too big, too impossible for God. No matter how overwhelming the circumstances, see God's power. He can do what no human can. When you believe in His power, you are choosing to trust in a force far greater than your own strength or understanding. By giving your struggles to Him, you are inviting the Creator of the universe to work on your behalf, and nothing is impossible for Him. Life often throws us into situations where we feel helpless. You may be facing a financial crisis, a broken relationship, a health issue, or a dream that seems too far out of reach. In those moments, it's easy to believe that nothing will ever change, that your problems are too big to overcome. But God's power is not limited by human obstacles. What is impossible for you is completely possible for Him. The Bible reminds us in Jeremiah 32:27, I am the Lord, the God of all mankind. Is anything too hard for me? This is a powerful declaration. There is nothing too difficult for God. No matter how long you've struggled or how hopeless things seem, His power can bring breakthroughs when you least expect them. Think about the many stories in Scripture where God's power changed impossible situations. When the Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, God parted the sea and made a way where there was none. Exodus 14:21-22. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, God shut the mouths of the lions and kept him safe. Daniel 6:22. When Jesus stood outside Lazarus' tomb after 4 days of death, he called him back to life. John 11:43-44. These aren't just ancient stories, they are reminders that God's power is still active and available to you today. When you believe in his power, you stop carrying your burdens alone. You acknowledge that God is bigger than your problems and that he can move in ways you cannot. This belief shifts your focus from the size of your struggle to the magnitude of his ability. It gives you hope when circumstances try to tell you otherwise. Believing in God's power also means trusting that he can open doors no one else can. Sometimes we face closed doors, missed opportunities, rejection, or situations where nothing seems to work out. But God specializes in making a way where there is no way. He can open doors to new jobs, heal broken hearts, restore what was lost, and bring new opportunities that you could never create on your own. Consider this. Have you ever faced a situation that felt impossible, only to see things turn around in ways you never expected? That wasn't luck, it was God working behind the scenes, making the impossible possible. His power can move mountains, break chains, and transform even the most hopeless situations. When you believe in his power, you also position yourself for miracles. Miracles aren't just stories from the past, they still happen today. But you must first trust that God is able. When you release your problems into his hands, you are creating space for his supernatural power to move in your life. As Ephesians 3:20 says, "Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us." God is not just capable of meeting your needs, he is able to exceed your greatest expectations. But believing in his power doesn't mean you'll always see instant results. Sometimes God's power works behind the scenes in ways you cannot immediately see. There are seasons when the answer is delayed, not because he is absent, but because he is aligning things perfectly for you. Faith is trusting that even when you don't see a way, he is still making one. So whatever you're facing today, no matter how heavy the burden, how deep the pain, or how impossible the situation may seem, give it to God. Believe that his power is greater. Release your fears, your doubts, and your bouts, and your need to control everything. When you do, you invite the limitless power of heaven to work in your life. He is still a miracle-working God. Nothing is too hard for him. Believe in his power and watch him do what only he can do. Stay patient and faithful. Trusting God means staying patient even when you don't see immediate results. In a world where everything moves fast, where answers are expected instantly, and waiting feels uncomfortable, patience can be difficult. But when it comes to God's plans, his timing is not ours. There are seasons in life when it feels like nothing is happening, even though you've prayed, believed, and done everything you know to do. It's during these moments that your faith is truly tested. Patience is not just about waiting, it's about how you wait. It's easy to trust God when everything is going your way. But real faith is demonstrated when you continue to trust even when the answer is delayed. Faith grows when you choose to believe that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating things for your good, even when there is no visible evidence. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." This verse reveals a profound truth. Waiting on God is not wasted time. When you stay patient and faithful, he strengthens you. While you wait, he is preparing you, developing your character, deepening your trust, and shaping you for what's ahead. Think about the life of Joseph in the Bible. God gave him a vision of leadership and greatness, but instead of immediate promotion, Joseph faced betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. For years, it seemed as though nothing was happening. But God was working behind the scenes. Every hardship Joseph endured was preparing him for the moment when he would rise to second in command over Egypt. God's promise didn't fail. His timing was just different. When you're waiting, it's easy to become discouraged and wonder if God has forgotten you. But he hasn't. Delays are not denials. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't working. Sometimes the waiting period is where the most important work happens inside of you. God is refining your heart, increasing your wisdom, and aligning circumstances to fulfill his promise at the perfect moment. In Galatians 6:9, we are reminded, let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Notice that phrase, at the proper time. There is a set time for your breakthrough, your answer, and your miracle. It may not come when you want it, but when it arrives, it will be right on time. If you give up too soon, you might miss the blessing God has already prepared for you. Faithfulness during waiting seasons is also about continuing to do what God has called you to do, even when you don't see results. It means showing up, praying, serving, and believing even when nothing seems to be changing. Just because you don't see an immediate outcome doesn't mean your faithfulness is in vain. Every act of obedience, every prayer, and every step of faith is planting seeds that will eventually produce a harvest. Consider this: when a farmer plants a seed, he doesn't expect a harvest the next day. He understands that there is a process, seasons of watering, nurturing, and waiting. The same principle applies to your life. God's promises will come to pass, but they will happen in His perfect timing, not yours. And just like the seed beneath the soil, God is working in ways you cannot see until the appointed time of growth and blessing. Staying patient and faithful also means guarding your heart against doubt and negativity. It's easy to lose hope when things aren't happening fast enough. But instead of focusing on what you don't see, focus on what you know. God is faithful. He has never failed, and He won't start now. If He has promised it, He will bring it to pass. Numbers 23:19. When you feel weary or impatient, remind yourself of how far God has already brought you. Look back on the times He made a way when there was no way. If He was faithful then, He will be faithful now. Keep speaking words of faith over your situation. Declare that God is working even when you don't see it. Let your heart stay anchored in His promises rather than being swayed by your circumstances. What you do in the waiting matters. Will you give up and walk away? Or will you trust God's process, knowing that what He started in you, He will complete? Philippians 1:6. The answer you are waiting for might be closer than you think. Often the moment when you feel like quitting is the moment just before the breakthrough comes. So if you're in a waiting season, hold on. Don't let impatience rob you of God's best. Stay faithful in prayer, patient in expectation, and confident that God is working behind the scenes. His plans are good, His timing is perfect, and He is always faithful. What He promised is on its way. Keep believing, keep waiting, and trust that it's coming. Find peace and surrender. When you let God handle your troubles, you open the door to a profound and unshakable peace, one that the world cannot give and that circumstances cannot take away. This peace doesn't come from having all the answers or knowing how everything will work out. It comes from trusting that God is in control and that He is fighting your battles on your behalf. Surrendering to God is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of faith, a bold declaration that you believe He is greater than any problem you face. Life is filled with challenges, financial struggles, broken relationships, health issues, and uncertainties about the future. Trying to carry these burdens on your own can be exhausting. The more you try to control everything, the heavier the weight becomes. But here's the truth. You were never meant to carry it all by yourself. God invites you to release your burdens and find rest in Him. In Matthew 11:28-30, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." When you surrender your problems to God, you are no longer relying on your own limited strength. Instead, you are trusting in His unlimited power. This act of surrender is like placing your heaviest burdens into the hands of someone who is more than capable of carrying them. It doesn't mean that your problems will disappear overnight, but it does mean that you no longer have to face them alone. God takes on the weight of your worries, and in exchange, He gives you peace that transcends understanding. Philippians 4:7. One of the most beautiful aspects of finding peace and surrender is realizing that God is already fighting your battles even when you cannot see it. There are spiritual battles taking place behind the scenes that you may never fully understand. In Exodus 14:14, we are given a powerful promise: the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Sometimes the greatest thing you can do is stop striving, stop overthinking, and simply trust that God is working on your behalf. Think of the story of Jehoshaphat in 2 Chronicles 20. Faced with a massive enemy army, he didn't rely on human strength or military strategy. Instead, he turned to God in prayer and declared, "We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you." 2 Chronicles 20:12. God responded by telling him to stand firm and watch as he fought the battle for them. Without lifting a weapon, Jehoshaphat's army witnessed a miraculous victory because they surrendered the fight to God. Surrendering doesn't mean you give up responsibility or stop taking action. It means you stop trying to control the outcome and trust that God's plan is better than anything you could design. Isaiah 26:3 says, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you." When your heart is focused on God, His peace surrounds you no matter how chaotic your circumstances may seem. Many people live in constant anxiety because they are holding on to things they were never meant to carry. What are you holding on to today? Is it a fear of the future, an unresolved conflict, or a situation that feels completely out of your control? Whatever it is, you can release it to God. Surrender is not a one-time act. It is a daily decision to place your life and your circumstances into His hands. Peace also comes from recognizing that God's plans are better than your own. You may have a vision for how things should work out, but God sees the bigger picture. What seems like a setback may actually be a setup for something far greater. By surrendering your timeline, your desires, and your worries to Him, you allow Him to work in ways beyond your imagination. As Ephesians 3:20 reminds us, now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us. If you're struggling to let go, start by praying. Talk to God honestly. Tell Him your fears, your frustrations, and your hopes. Then release those burdens into His care. Every time anxiety tries to creep back in, remind yourself that God is already at work. He hasn't forgotten you. He hasn't abandoned you. He is fighting for you, even when you can't see it. When you find peace and surrender, you walk through life differently. Your heart is no longer weighed down by fear. Your mind is no longer trapped in endless worry. Instead, you live with a quiet confidence that God is in control and that no matter what happens, you are safely held in His hands. So whatever you are facing today, let it go and give it to God. Trust that He is working things out in ways you cannot see. The battle is not yours to fight alone. When you surrender to Him, you will discover a deep and lasting peace that no situation can shake. He is in control, and that truth will always bring peace.